May 350th Calvert History Comes to Life lecture. We're really pleased to have with us Ailene Hutchins this evening. And do a little speaking here. I'm Pat Hoffman, Director of the Calvert Library, and I'm very happy that you've all come out this evening for this program. You know, we're having a contest. The contest has been that people who attended every single lecture would be eligible to win a prize at the end. Well, I still have Jenny Plummer-Welker, who's here, and I have Cindy and Joe Parker and Joan Tillman, who are still in the running for a prize, and I'd like you all to see that Kirsty Gudelag really, really would like to be considered we have one more before the halfway point. So now that people know that there's a contest, because we didn't really start this until about month 2 or 3, we thought, well, we'll have 2 contests. We'll have a 6-month contest so that the people who make it to all of them in the first 6 months will be eligible for a prize. And then we'll start again. So, Ralph, you could win a prize. So we'll do 2 contests instead of 1. So to make it a little more fun for the end of the year. So we still have a few though. There's 5 people right now, including me, who've been to all of them so far. Okay, I'd like to do a couple of thank yous. We're very thankful to Jefferson Patterson Park for letting us have this program here this evening and for being our partner. Thank you, Mike Smollett, for your helpfulness. And Pam Schubert is probably somewhere other than in this room, and she's been very helpful too to make this work. I'd like to thank Robin from the Calvert Library staff for helping with the program as well. Now, I'd like to give you a couple of commercials about events that are coming up that are similar or historical in nature that you might be interested in attending. Next Wednesday evening, the 19th, the Friends of the Library's annual meeting will take place at the library in Prince Frederick at 7 o'clock. There'll be a very short business meeting, and our speakers for the evening will be Mari Andrews and Sarah Evenrick Leland, who have written the book about St. Leonard. So that should be a really nice lecture for people who come to the Calvert 350th to attend, because it's, again, historical in nature. Then on the 26th of this month, which is a Wednesday, at 7 o'clock at the Calvert Library in Prince Frederick, we're going to have Joe Norris, an evening of historic songs and storytelling. That should be a lot of fun. Then in June, the next Calvert History Comes to Life lecture is on June 3rd, so it's early in the month. June 3rd is a Thursday, and this one is at Calvert Library in Prince Frederick. Okay. And of course, summer's coming up, and summer's always a really busy and exciting time at the library, something for everybody. This year we're going to have something new for adults called Beach Book Bingo. So when you come by the library in June, you'll be able to see what that is and have some fun with that. Okay. I'd like to ask Fred Dellinger to come up. He's with the St. Leonard Vision Group, if he would like to see my scholar.
Thank you, Pat, very much. I'm Fred Dellinger, as she said. I represent the St. Leonard Vision Group, which is a group of St. Leonard area decisions. Actually, it's a greater St. Leonard citizens who have been working for a number of years now to help make St. Leonard a better place to live than it is already. One of the projects that we've been involved in is to write the history and heritage of this wonderful area, this wonderful heritage. We now have that work completed. It's being presented to the county as our gift to the county. And I'm here this evening to give it to the Jefferson Patterson Park to give it actually 2 copies. But let me just briefly tell you about the book and who will be getting the book and who will be reading the book. The St. Leonard Vision Group has given contributions. Able to speak up a little bit more. So okay. Thank you very much. The St. Leonard Vision Group, through contributions, has been able to provide sufficient books so that all the families with children at Mutual Elementary School and St. Leonard Elementary School will have books by the end of the school year, on June, or June of this year, to take home and read and learn about the area that we know as St. Leonard. Also, the Calvert County School District has selected this book to be used countywide in the 8th grade classes, starting in the fall, for their 8th grade social studies and history classes, general classes, as a locally provided, if you will, resource. We are providing these books to the school as our 350th gift, and then it comes compliments of all of our contributors who made this book entirely possible. Part of this is to distribute them to some of the key areas within the secondary area and Calvert County. Therefore, I'd like to present these two copies in one installment. We'll have copies 87, 86 of our book, which are signed by both the writer, Sarah M. McEwen, and our illustrator, Eric Hamilton, where they're used here at the library of the Immaculate Trust, and they're enjoying it as well. These are for you.
This is a great resource, a great addition to the local history. Thank you for offering information. These will all be available in our library. It's not a living library, but the library is here in the building, and anybody's allowed to use it. So it's big work.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next Friday night, not this coming Friday, but Friday week, Dr. Bill Kelso, who's been excavating Jamestown Island, the Salmon Ford, the 1607 Ford, and he will be speaking here in this room at 7 o'clock next Friday night. And it's our Friends Organization annual meeting. Let everybody who's welcome to come. It should be a very interesting lecture. And the other thing is, on July 3rd is the 350th, that's the birthday of the county, and the county's decided to celebrate, do that major celebration here at the park. So July 3rd will be a picnic at the park, and it's going to be a fun day, and the governor is coming, and so it should be a lot of fun. So, and I also want to tell a little quick story. In 1983, Mrs. Patterson donated this property. As part of that gift, she set up an advisory committee. And in that advisory committee, the governor was allowed to appoint 3 members to the advisory committee. And the very first person who was probably appointed by the governor was Ailene Hutchins, over 20 years ago now, or 21 years ago. And it's been a long time. And we have a meeting coming up at the end of this month. And so I would like to present to Ailene, since we're able to come to our 20th anniversary, this aerial photograph, which says to Ailene Hutchins, present your role in helping to fulfill the dream that is Jefferson Patterson Park Museum. So thank you very much for your And with that, I'm going to get off the stage.
Is that book available for purchase?
Yes, this book is available for purchase. Fred, do you want to say where it's available?
The book is currently available at Bueller's Market in St. Leonard, at the Chesapeake Auction House. They're also in St. Leonard, at Educate and Celebrate in Prince Frederick, and at there's a restaurant on Rooms Island Road, which I can never remember the name of.
Gateway?
Gateway, thank you. It's also available at Gateway. We're going to be opening a number of other venues very shortly, which will have the book for sale. Coincidentally, I did bring a few extra copies this evening, so certainly after the meeting, if someone wants to get a hold of me, I can provide you with a copy of the book. It is for sale, and we will be adding venues as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Well, it's my honor to introduce Ailene Hutchins. I've known of her for a number of years, and I have admired her work greatly. I was honored to go to her home the other day to take her picture, and had an opportunity to see the results of the research that she's done on thousands and thousands of note cards, and she's entering the data into the computer. She just is full of so much knowledge in our area, so I just admire her so much and the work that she's done. She will be presenting a topic tonight, Calvert County Potpourri, so she can tell us about anything that she feels like like about Calvert County. And she's written 3 books, Hunting Creek 100, Calvert County, Maryland Early Land Records, and John Broom's memoirs. So please join me in welcoming Ailene Hutchins.
Thank you very much. I have so much material on odd and unusual things about Calvert County that I hardly knew where to start to present some information to you tonight. The reason I have so many unusual items because when I first started doing research in about 1970 maybe, when I would go to Annapolis to do my research and I would pick up a big volume of whatever that might have been, wills or provincial court records or whatever, instead of confining myself to a reference I had been given that said, page 42 is something about Joe Brown who lived in Calvert County, I found Joe Brown. But the temptation was to go back and go through the book, page by page by page by page. That's how I gathered much of the material, most of the material that I have, and that's why I came across so many unusual items. And I hardly knew, as I said, where to start as some kind of connection between the various items that I found. So it may not go together the way you'd like or the way I would really like if I had thought about it more carefully. But since it is, this is what you're going to get. Some time ago, this has been recently, I found a book that was talking about the manor system or the manorial system in Maryland. And you know that there were manors that were large tracts of land, several thousand acres in most instances, that were granted by the Lord Baltimore or by someone else in one way or another to a particular person. And one of the things that was interesting to me about that was the fact that there was a woman, the only one I found the reference to, Dame Jane Sewell, who was the widow of the Secretary of State for the province of Maryland. And she was given a special warrant for the manor of Mattaponi, which of course is across the river. But the fact that she was a woman is why I thought it was important for you to know about it. And as far as manors that were in Calvert County, the ones in the very early days were Abingdon Manor in 1653. Abingdon Manor was up the county in the Huntingtown area, let's say. Then there was Brookgate Manor, which was down this way towards Rhode Island and where Jersey Lines lived and all down that area. And then there was Charles Gibbs, which is now the PG&E plant. And then there was Elton Head and Great Elton Head. And those two took up most everything from Solomon to Harper Creek on the bayside, roughly speaking. So those were the manors for Calvert County. But, and one of the interesting things I found was that in the very early days, the lord of the manor would give a new tenant a small piece of ground, just a little piece of dirt, a plot of grass he would pick up, or a twig, to signal to him that you are here as a tenant and this is for you, peaceful possession. I thought that was kind of interesting to know. Then there was, in much later years, in the Huntingtown area, this would have been originally, I guess, part of Abingdon Manor. And there was a church there. If you know where the Methodist church is there now in Huntingtown, if you go past that towards, you're going out as though you're going down to Duke Landing or going over this way to Longmore. There's a little hill up there behind the church, and there's a graveyard there. There was a church there that was once known as Manor Woods Church. And it belonged to a man whose name was Harrison. And he gave the land for the church. At some point in time, there had been something there and they wanted to add on to it. And he said that he would give them the land to build another church there, provided it was named for his mother. And so her name was Miranda Harrison, and the church came to be known as Miranda. So there's a close connection, but that was always known as Manor Woods Church. So that was just an interesting side that I thought you might like to know. So that's all I'm going to tell you about. The next thing I would like to tell you about, I think, are perhaps something about people and marriage contracts. Do not believe some of the things that were in the early marriage contracts. For example, this I found, 1638, the first marriage license for a Maryland woman. William Edwin, who was a planter, this is what it says in the book. He acknowledges himself to owe to the Lord Proprietor 1,000 weight of merchantable tobacco to be paid upon demand, in case he had pro-contracted himself to any other woman than Mary's Whitechurch spinster, or in case there is any consanguinity, affinity, or other lawful impediment to the knowledge of the said William Edwin, why he should not be married to the said Mary Whitehead. That was recorded so that they were able to get married. Then there was another one, that this was a marriage certificate of 1670 for William Ford and Sarah Preston. Margaret Preston, the daughter of Richard Preston, had a nuptial agreement with this man. She reserved for her own use a certain amount of silver, money, plate, a Negro girl, and she also in some rooms in the home furnished with bedding and so forth. Then there was one more, which I thought was really interesting. This one was 1662. The marriage was described as, this was, I want to explain to you first maybe, this was signed only by the bride, to be, not by the husband. This is a marriage contract. This is her dedication, whose signature was filed in the provincial court in 1669. She dedicated herself to be the loving wife of the man whom she was going to marry. She promised to love and cherish him and comfort him as her true and lawful husband by free and mutual consent of my heart, in love to thee above all others, and never shall nor will ever yield to love or like any other but thee also during each other's life, in the presence of Almighty God. And he signed it. He didn't have to. Well, that's kind of good. This is a long one. I'll just read you some of it. This is 1665. In the name of most high and mighty Jehovah, everlasting, glorious, and blessed to all eternity, to thee be all honor and praise. And it goes on to say, therefore, to thee that art that great and mighty judge of heaven and earth, and who shall come to be judged by thee, and to give account of all thy deeds, and goes on and on and on. Therefore, in the present, P-R-E-S-E-N-T-S, the people in the early days were awful fellows. Awful. Anyway, she just said, and I shall hope and ever expect mercy and salvation. I, Edith Bain, do freely freely and fully dedicate and contract myself unto thee, Jonathan Parker, to be thy true and lawful wife, to love thee, cherish thee, and comfort thee as my true and lawful husband, until free and mutual consent of my heart in love for thee. And it goes on and on and on and on. And again, she was the only one who had signed. This was another one. And these are marriage contracts and problems on the this was the breach of promise of the marriage contract. This is as late as 1831, where this woman sued a man for breach of promise of marriage, and the jury punished the non-performing lover by a verdict of $300. This one was 1707. This was a case of a woman against her husband for support. And the question was whether the governor could compel her husband, quote, until cohabitation to allow her maintenance. And since he was at a particular time in the custody of the sheriff for contempt, anyway, the sheriff was ordered to deliver to his wife a certain amount of money and to pay her so much a year until they agreed to cohabit. There was a kind of interesting ones about marriage contracts that are certainly different from anything you might hear or have today. Some other interesting things I found. Let's see, I'll tell you about these are people names. And I take the liberty to tell you about people names because of my own name. My name is Ailene. Most people pronounce it anything but correctly. It's mostly pronounced Ailene, which I absolutely hate. And the correct pronunciation is like Ellen with an E, Ailene. Other people call me Ailene. My elementary school teacher, whom I had for 7 grades of elementary school, never learned how to pronounce it. To her, I was always Ailene. And I was named for my 2 grandmothers. My New England grandmother was Ailene Jackson, who was born in New Hampshire. My Calvert County grandmother, this is why I take the liberty to use other people's names in describing things here. Her name was Docket Elizabeth Bowen. And of course, there are Bowens everywhere, you can't get rid of them. Her name was Docket. She was so named because she was born while her father was serving in the court, serving as the clerk to the court. So they named her Docket, but I kept thinking, suppose my mother had named me Docket Ailene. I think I would have just crawled in a hole. So that's why I take the liberty to tell you about some of the names of people. Some of these subjects are kind of interesting, I think. There was a man whose name was John Halfhead. There was also a man whose name was Biggerhead. And that I thought was interesting because his name came from the fact that his mother's last name was Bigger. And she married a man whose last name was Head. And so they had a son, what else are they going to name? Biggerhead. There was a woman whose name was Mourning, M-O-U-R, Mourning Billinger. There was another one whose name was Imenia, I-M-N-E-N-I-A. Then there was Thomas Parcelo. That I thought was an interesting name, and in later years, 1880s maybe, there was a man in the county who had a little store right down where Mill Creek and what's the other one? Mill Creek and
John?
Yeah, where the 2 meet down there. I have a plaque showing his store, which is just going right down into the water. There, his name was Parcelo Ludwig. I don't know where Parcelo itself came from, but there was a man way back in early days. There was a man whose interesting name I thought was Richard Petticoat. Sounded like Petticoat. Then there was Keziah, and Mike knows about Keziah because he had Keziah in his family. This was Keziah Kershaw. And I kept wondering, where in the world did the name Keziah come from? Finally, I found that it comes from the Bible because Keziah was the second daughter of Job. And again, there I go, you know, I'm going to find something about this and I got to go to the page in the Bible, I'll find it. Then there was Mahalia, which I think is a beautiful name, a nice Irish sounding name. And I found out, however, it came from a man's name, Mahali, who was of the family of Moses and Aaron, again, from the Bible. And I guess through the years that people had a daughter, they wanted to name her that name, so they named her Mahalia. Mahalia was an A on the end of it. And Dave Estabrook has the name Mahalia in her family, I know. There was one person whose name was Goody Monday. There was another one whose name was Christmas Smith. Then there was, I like this one too, Deliverance Lovely. Then there was Peter Hardfeather. It sounds like it has an Indian connection perhaps there somewhere. Then this one, I don't know where this one came from exactly, but his name was William Ninefingers. Then there was Richard Cracklow. And then there was Misery Claus. And Precocia Time. There, I mean, I could go on and on and on. I'll just pick out some of the most unusual ones. And then this, because it was had to do with names, I couldn't resist mentioning it. This was a newspaper item from a newspaper which came out in Washington, D.C. from the early 1800s until 1870. It was called the National Intelligencer. And a dear lady who I got to know really by mail and by phone conversation, we had never personally met. Her name is Joan Dixon. And for a number of years, she has been working on pulling items from that Washington newspaper. And items that might be of interest in terms of a state or in terms of unusual things that might have happened. And she has published them in books. I have every one of them. And it comes out fairly fine print, and I go through it. I'm looking for anything that looks unusual, anything that might relate to anybody in Calvert County. This is one that was in the paper. This is 1838. Married lately at New Orleans. Mr. Alexander Philip Socrates Amelius Koza Annabelle Marcellus George Washington Frederick. Caroline Sophia Maria Jackson Wortley Montague Jonah Williams. Some of the early laws. A little bit of information here. This one, the 1666. This is a case about a man whose name was John Coode, C-O-O-D, or it was spelled. And he was said to have made very blasphemous remarks. And after the assembly was enacted, stating that whosoever blasphemes is to be bored through the tongue and fined 20 pounds of silver. And if he is not able to pay, he should be in prison for 6 months, and for every second offense, he is to be stigmatized on the card with B and fined 40 pounds of silver. That's pretty bad, you know. I wonder what would happen today with all the blasphemous remarks. Anybody on me. This is another one. This is a law about service. In 1638, a servant at the end of the term of service to someone who was brought in here or had hired him to live with them. If it was a man, he was to receive a cloth suit, shirt, shoes and stockings, and a cap. And stockings, and a cap. If it was, and all had to be new. If she was a woman, she was to receive a petticoat, a waistcoat, a smock, shoes and stockings, and all the other clothes she might have had. Servants also got 3 barrels of corn, 2 hoes and axes, and 50 acres of land. This was repealed in 1663, however, and a master could give more land or less. If that's what he wanted to do. But I thought that was kind of an interesting law. This one, I really don't know what these 2 words mean, but maybe somebody here does, so I'll read it anyway. This is a discussion in the Assembly in 1674. Cases in how the courts were going to proceed in any criminal cases that might come up. And it said, there is no law known that determines proceedings in criminal cases. An act relates only to cases of, and this are the 2 words, meum, M-E-U-M, and Q, Q-U-U-M. Anybody know here what they mean? I'm Latin, I suppose, but I have no idea what they mean. But I thought it was interesting. Therefore, they judge it better to settle the proceedings by a new law than it is on the basic conditions. They weren't sure what they should do when there were criminal cases, so they either made up a law or they thought, well, we just have to wait and see whatever, if somebody can come up with a law, we'll see what happens. This one, this one was a bill that came out in 1681 to restrain the exportation of leather, rawhide, deer, and elk skins. And it was done to encourage the people who were living in the area to do their own tanning and make their own shoes and provide those properties for people who might want to buy them rather than exporting and sending everything away. There was one about women, 1681. They had the law that they were going to try to determine whether women should be taxed as men were, and whether, if they were going to be taxed, whether they should be taxed if they worked outside in the ground or if they just worked in the house. So they had to make a decision. I don't know if they ever made that decision, but that was a law that was proposed. There was also a law going back to the 1680s or before, that when the assemblies met, the doorkeeper was told that a messenger at the door, unless one of the men who was coming to the assembly would not deliver up his sword. They came sword and ready to go to battle, I guess, if they had to. And he was supposed to be not to be admitted if he did not leave his sword, which was safety for to take care of it for him. Also, the rules of the lower house, 1683. No one shall come into the house of assembly whilst the house is sitting with a sword or other weapon, but he shall put the same into the hand of the doorkeeper or whomever is appointed thereto upon penalty of a fine. And let's see what else is here that might be interesting. This had to do with orphan, and there were terrible conditions through the early years in terms of orphan. And finally, in 1692, this was an act for the better administration of justice, giving a minor recovery of legacy. The court was an orphan-type court, was to be held at least every other month. Accounting was to be done within 12 months. The widow was to get 1/3 of the estate of the deceased person, and 2/3 of it was to go to the children. And if there were no children, then the next kin of blood no Negro or other slave of the estate was to be sold for payment of debts and are reserved by the administrators as long as there are other goods to satisfy any debt that might have arisen. But the estate was so small that it would not extend to free education for the children or the slaves or whomever, then the orphans were to be bound out as an apprentice to some handcraft or trade for at the discretion of the county court until he or she was 21 years old. So there's another thing that was, very sad in some cases about orphans. And there was, this is another reference too that I had. Well, this one really was about guardian. This was a 1732 will, where a man left his wife the home plantation, and she was to take care of her son, and if she wasn't able to do so, she was to bind him out to a particular person. And one of the things I found, this had to do with a member of the Johns family of Calvert County, and they were Quaker family. And one of the sons was to be bound out, and not really bound out, he was to be sent to Philadelphia. There were relatives there who were in the business of cabinet making. And so he was sent there, even as a very young boy, to learn the trade of cabinetry. So there were many instances, some good, some not so good, when children, were bound out. So that's some interesting things about laws and that sort of thing I thought you might be interested in. I think that goes a little bit about punishment, but this is a little bit more. This was a man in 1690. These are Calvert County. Most of the things I'm telling you are instances of people in Calvert County. I prefer not to use names except in rare instances. This one where the man took tobacco that belonged to somebody else, and he changed the marking, because even in later days, people, had a metal stamp of some sort that they branded on their houses of tobacco, so when it went to Baltimore, wherever it went, they know these all belong to Joe Blow or whoever. But anyway, this guy decided that he was responsible for getting this where it was supposed to go, so he thought, oh, well, no, I don't know. So he changed the marking on it. But somebody found out he had done it. And what he had to do was to pay 4 times the amount that it would have drawn in value. And not only that, he had to stand in the pillory like this for all day long. So I think he's going to do that. This one I think was an interesting one. This one had to do with treatment of slaves and had to do with the estate of a man whose name was John Little. And Little owned property which he acquired really by marriage, property called Littleton. And it was up Honey Creek area, near Bowling Alley area, up in that general area. But this was 1656. William Howes, H-O-W-S-E, and Stephen Harlow said they heard John Little call his servant on the Sabbath day, which was unsupposed to do, make him work, and made him beat mortar and bake on the Sabbath day. He said he was also employed to fetch home his servant and his Indian from the Indian's cabin, and they had gone there to hide because this man apparently was very cruel to him. But he ordered this man to bring them home, and so he said, he had to do it. And if they wouldn't come, then they were to have their clothing taken and have their rings remade. So this guy would do it. So Little got 2 Indians to bring that guy home, and then he had him bound and said he was going to kill him if he didn't stay with there and work for him. I guess he said, I don't know, it didn't say. But then there was another one, the same man. He was, and this is again 1656, 57, he was said to have notoriously scandalized Mrs. Howe. was ordered to stand for 1 hour at the door of the court with the paper in his hat, signifying it, and he had to pay a fine of 500 pounds of tobacco. Another one, William Berry, petitioned the court to have Berry pay a fine for scandalizing by things he said about his parents. The court ordered Little to stand by the whipping post, stripped naked from the waist up for 1 hour with the whip over his head. And if he tried to move, the whip would fall down, would be applied to him, and again, pay 500 pounds of tobacco. So they were just an interesting thing that most might be interested in knowing about the early days. These are some news items of various kinds that might appear interesting. This one was a duel. I'm sure many of you have heard about the duel at Tawny Place, which is down Battle Creek area. But what you might not have known was, of course, the duel was fought over the love of a young woman, as usual. And the Tawny man, according to the material that I have found, he fled to Virginia to escape any punishment that might have gotten to him. And he died there. But the family had his body brought back home for burial. But the man who was the other man in the duel, his name was Magruder, he insisted that that coffin had to be opened so he could be sure that the body in it was the body of this guy who had killed his friend. And so when they did, they opened the coffin and he scanned to make the body look like it didn't matter. He wanted to make sure it was her. These were some little bits and pieces of ads and unusual items. This one is one of 1838. Governor Joseph Kent was born, may have been born in Calvert County, if not in Calvert, in Prince George's County. His family owned a great deal of land in the area between, I'll say, Church and Old Malvern, I'll say, roughly. But there was a news item which said that he had been criticized for having been born with a silver spoon in his nose. The newspaper item, however, said that couldn't possibly be true because his father had been a tin plate worker. So apparently he had a tin plate. This one, these are some were unusual kinds of advertising, I guess, that kind of intrigued me. You always see things in those early papers about horses, stallions, being standing at stud at so-and-so's farm, you know, so people could come and have their mares bred and this sort of thing. But this one was said, this is 1830. Notice is given that Don Fernando, a jackass, descended from the Dutch stock that had been imported into this country, rising 4 years old and 14 hands high, remarkably well performed, will stand the ensuing season at Westbury on West River for $8 cash or $10. The money will be returned if the mare does not prove with foal and $half to the groom. Dan Fernando is limited to 20 mares. Pasturage is free, but they will not be answerable for any that escapes from pasturage. And that was, I just thought, an unusual kind of ad. This one started out by saying, "Vanity, thy name is woman." And there was an account of a paper, this really was not in Calvert County, this is an Alabama newspaper now, which told of the death of a young woman who, as a bride of only 2 days, had worn a corset so strong that it ruptured blood vessels. So I thought of Scarlett O'Hara and someone was you ever know, you know what I've seen FEMA is, everybody knows my team. You know how I got to be in the blue yard? Well, I can tell you, I didn't. In 1899, there was a man whose name was Dr. George Bunton, and he had Calvert County connections because in the 1880s, 90s, there was a lawyer in Calvert County whose name was J. Briscoe Bunton, who had an office right here where Ludwig Harbor actually is. This was a Dr. George Bunton, who was of the same St. Mary County family. He graduated from the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, and he opened a drugstore in Baltimore. He developed a formula for sunburn remedy made up of the cream that he had developed, and he packed it in little blue jars and called it Bunting's Sunburn Remedy. And it sold like hotcakes, and people who had eczema said, "Oh my, it's the best thing I've ever used." And he was smart enough that they get it cured my eczema. He named the product Noxzema, and that's how most of it's known, today. There was just a few of those I thought you might know of it. Now, I don't know what else I might have here. Oh, this one I do want to say is, tell me how when I'm supposed to stop talking.
You're okay.
This one, we talked earlier, and I meant to start off by telling you this. All these people were coming in here telling you about books about St. Leonard and books about this and that. I have to tell you that my son David, who's sitting in the back of the room, and I are about to produce, because before too shall be up and find enough money, a book which will be a pictorial history of Calvert County. It will be a hardback book. It will contain pictures that we have gathered from people all over the county. We have been particularly interested in trying to find pictures of the black people of Calvert County. So many of them, of course, did not have cameras, couldn't afford cameras in those days. But we have been so lucky. We have had phone calls from people out of the state, people in D.C. who have called, and we have relatives who live here and say, "I've got a picture of my grandma who died in 18 whatever when she was 100 years old. Would you like to have it?" Well, of course we would. Problem is sometimes the pictures are not that reproducible, but we have gathered quite a number of them, and we're very proud of the fact that we're going to have those pictures to add to the things we have. We're interested, have been interested, in finding pictures of, as I said, people and places. Everybody sees a picture of Congress, or everybody sees a picture of President, or everybody sees a picture of this house or that house. But how about the ones that are equally important that nobody knows anything about, or may not have a picture of them? We've been lucky in some instances to find the pictures of some of the old homes. My own home, where I was born, it's still standing right now. The property has been sold over and over several times, but it's a very old house, and it happens to be the place where my grandfather, my father, and I were all born. So it's not brand new, it's brand new. But we have a picture of that, of course. What we are doing is including in here, we're also including bits and pieces of information, such as a page from an ad that might have been in an old issue of the Calvert Gazette, or a page that might have come out of a bookkeeping information that storekeeper kept, that he sold so many pounds of lard to kilograms for 5 cents a pound. Some of those kinds of things might be interesting to someone who would enjoy looking through not just a picture, but some of this other information. So we are putting it together, we're working on it, and we hope to have it available before the next 6 months, maybe next year, within the year, we're hoping. So we'll let you know when it's going to be available, but I just want to let you know that. This, I think, is interesting. This is Calvert County as it was described in an ad of western shore of the Chesapeake Bay, one of the smallest counties, being in length about 32 miles, average width about 7 miles, area 235 square miles. It is a peninsula bounded by the bay on the east, the Patuxent River on the west, and on the north by Anne Arundel County. Surface undulating, is draining from the central elevation towards the bay and the river, into which numerous low creeks empty. The soil is soft, fine mold, except on the Patuxent, where it is more clay and well adapted to the growth of corn, tobacco, and wheat, although its great staple is tobacco. The climate is generally warm and mild. The waters of the Chesapeake and Patuxent abound in the finest fish and oysters. Immense quantities of the latter are annually carried to Baltimore and the northern markets for trade employing large numbers of men. Tripoli, used as a polishing material, is found in many locations in deposits on the Patuxent, being very large areas to find them. Marl, M-A-R-L. Marl exists also, affording good fertilizer. Oak, chestnut, pine, and locust are natural timber growths, and most of it line the navigable waters. Drum Point, at the mouth of the Patuxent, is the proposed terminal of the Baltimore and Drum Point Railway, one of the most safe and commodious harbors of the country. Vessels of the largest size can enter and rise and anchor with perfect safety all seasons of the year. And the completion of the road, listen to this, the completion of the road to this point will afford great facilities for freight and travel, and it will be a pioneer to this fertile peninsula section of the state. Wonder what it would have happened if that had come and we had the trains that we didn't have to fool with all these state roads and county roads that were always square in the bed that are so full of traffic all the time. Who knows? I thought you should know that. Now, I don't know of anything else probably that I can tell you that you don't already know. I bet you, I should tell you this. These are landings that were on the Chesapeake Bay. I have an 1824 map of a portion of Calvert County. Most of it deals with the landings along side, and the map was prepared by two men who were doing a survey for what was to be a very special fort to be built at what is now Point Hilton. Oh, that's Point Hilton. One is 72. These were the landings. Number one, Olmutz Landing, known to us today, generally speaking, as Syracuse. It says surrounded by the land of Dare on the bay and the land of Dare west of Syracuse. So the Olmutz family was very prominent in that particular part of Calvert County. Then there was Fraser Landing, below Parker Creek. The landing was, it said, near the east of Christ Church. It probably was somewhere in the vicinity of what most of you, I guess, would know as Government Run. Then there was Dorcas Bowen's. There's another Bowen's. Dorcas Bowen's landing was a very short distance below what is now Western Shore area. You know where that is. And then there was a landing, another landing place. There were several landings from Governor's Run down to Cove Point. Really, several landings all along that area. There was Wilson's Landing. That was just above Cove Point. Then along the river, on the riverside, there was County Creek, near what is is now Poppy's Point, if you know where Poppy's Point is, going up, back up, down, going down toward the Landing area. There was God's Grace, which would be the Leafy Fork area, going down below the going towards the river. There was Halloween Point, and there's been lots of arguments about it. Most of it later people called it Halloween, L-A-N-D. But in earliest records it was Halloween Point, supposedly, so I've read, said to be because you could holler over across the way to Benedict area if you want somebody to come over and visit or come over in their boat and pick you up and take care of the other side, which is of course like the days when the Benedict ferry was there. And some of you may remember that. I certainly do. I remember having to go down and blow your horn to get over to the other side. It was nice to put the lights on. And when I was in college, just finished college and had my first job working over there, I got over there, I would get there and hope that the man who ran the ferry, who was totally stone deaf, might hear me blowing my horn. Or if he wasn't asleep, that someone would wake him up and he'd come over and pick me up. The most beautiful thing that happened to me that on one of those times was I had a little Chevrolet coupe. This particular Monday morning, I was on my way to work in Harrison, and Captain Harry came over and picked me up. Got in the middle of the river, the motor company on him, on the ferry. And he said, you got to move the car. I got to get down to the end. I thought, my God, where am I going to move the ticket? Anyway, he said, come on back, and I'm revving up the car, not revving it up, that's for sure, but started it, and finally back, little by little, hoping I'm not going to end up in the river. Finally he said, okay. So he got in there, he fixed it, and we started it, but there were times, that particular morning, when I thought, well, someday they may hear about me, that me and my car. Then there was Brinkley Point, and that was just a little above Halloween Point, actually. There was Sheridan Point, which is still there today. And then there was Gonzales, and on some maps that's shown as Windmill Point. So you must have been there at some particular time. There was Carrots Landing, and we know that is Cave Farm today, generally speaking. And there are quite a few others, so I won't tell you that all. And then there, of course, there was Point Patience, and then there was Sandy Island, which we now know as Solomon. And there was also one, if you know, let's see, if you were coming down here, coming to Patterson Park, you come to a road that is called Marshall Road today. That went back there to the property that belonged to a man by the name of Williams. And there was a landing there. You could get in the skip there, and you could almost hop and skip and be over to the top of it. You know, that close, not that far across. So now, I don't know, oh, one other thing, I think, that I do want to say, is two things. One, how many of you know that Calvert County has a hemlock preserve? Well, a few of you. That hemlock preserve is the southernmost one of its kind in this whole general area of the southern states, I guess you would say, where it's going towards the north. And it's in there, it was, and some gentlemen bought it. There were numerous families who owned the property, and someone, some dear kind man who thought that the hemlock preserve was worth preserving, bought the property from the different families, and then it was presented to the hemlock preserve, which is who owns it now. And that, of course, is like the swamp, and I know you all know about that, but I thought if you didn't know about the hemlock preserve, you should know. And the only other thing I can think is if you ever are interested in doing research on your family, if it was from Calvert County, or neighboring counties, you might be interested to know that particularly from Calvert County, there were numerous families that in the early 1800s moved to Barnesville, Ohio. They decided that they wanted, some of these had been parts of Quaker families. They did not want to have slave labor, and they thought, well, maybe if we pull up stakes and we go somewhere else, we can hire other people to work for us, and we won't have to have slave labor. So what they did, they packed up everything, and they went to Barnesville, Ohio. When they got to the Ohio River, they crossed over that whole bunch of things. As far as they were concerned, they were west. You're not going further. You were in Wild Wild West as far as they were concerned. And it is unbelievable if you go to Barnesville, Ohio, as I have done, and go through a cemetery there, you'll think you're in Calvert County. It was just unbelievable the Calvert County name that I saw there. Also, some of those families left Barnesville, Ohio, and moved to Montgomery County, Indiana. There are numerous Calvert County families there. There are quite a number of families who moved to Bardstown, Kentucky, also, and also Ontario County in New York State. But you might like to know about that if you ever decide that you might want to do a little more research. And I don't know maybe anything else I can tell you about. Unless you have questions.
We can certainly have questions. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions this evening? Okay.
You mentioned in your description of Calvert County, I think you said it was a postcard or a tourist publication, something about mining Tripoli along the Hudson River. I've not heard that before. What was that?
Well, I'm not sure myself, but I know there are numerous references 1812 times about how if people would go and get into the cliff, there was something called marl, which is like clay type material. Tripoli, I think, was perhaps something similar to it, but it was used in fertilizer. And I know that there was a mill in the upper part of the county at the end of what's that road? Carolina Mill, yeah. And there was a mill there where this material apparently was done and mined all along there. And that's really all I know. I haven't been able to find too much data myself. Yes, ma'am?
I know there are a lot of families that pronounce Calvert County the way that you do, Calvert, but then there are others that seem to have a history here that pronounce it Calvert, and I just wondered what the discrepancy was.
I don't know. All I know is that all my life, my family and my grandfather's family said Calvert, and my grandfather's great-grandfather gave the land for the town of Prince Frederick, so I guess it was here in early enough days for it to be called Calvert. I also, the only thing, it always bothers me, so many people do say Calvert. And years and years ago, my husband and I took a trip to England. And I thought, well, now surely, somewhere over here, I'll be able to find out what you really are supposed to pronounce it. So I went to an area where some of the families that came to Calvert in the early days lived. And I went to a library. And I did a little research, and then I asked some people there who I thought should know, because they were researching themselves, please tell me, what do you consider from the British standpoint the correct pronunciation of this word? And they told me, Calvert. However, a friend of mine who I played with said, oh no, it's got to be Calvert. And she said, so I don't know. They will pronounce the word how you please, but I prefer Calvert. Some of my children say Calvert, and I fuss with them.
Is that something like Maple Road and Macall Road?
Yes. Yes, one of the men on the board of Patterson Park, I used to have to get after him because he would call it Maple Road. And I said, please don't say that. Because I never heard it said anything but Maple Road, and mention is, as a matter, there were families, including a Maple family in very early days on another one, I don't remember which one it was. But one thing that was very interesting to me, that in their will, they had a small piece of property that they did not leave to their family, and it was to be left to be used by the family to make sure that somewhere on that piece of property there would be a building of some sort, so that the poor who could not afford to pay to go to school or buy books would be taught in that school and would not have to pay. I thought that was an interesting one. One of the families I don't remember was in Maple. Yes, ma'am.
I was curious, when you were speaking about the orphans, you said that someone would be bound until he was 21, and the lifespan was so short in those days, but 21, which we now consider coming of age, seems very old when people were marrying at 15, 16.
True, but maybe that was what the law said, but maybe they, got around it somehow, but I was surprised at that too.
But I mean, was 21 considered coming of age at that time? Or was it?
I don't know. I know they came of age at about 16, maybe. There are numerous marriages where the brides were under 16. And so there were very many of them, and of course many instances in which children's babies died. Not babies died, but the mothers died of some of us they were so young. But I really don't know positively, a legal, what was considered the legal age.
Okay, one more question.
Well, they were still getting orphans on up in the 30s. My great uncle, you might remember Uncle Malcolm.
Oh, sure did.
He was 22. And as soon as they were 21, they were getting suited clothes, some money and everything. So that had been going on for years and years.
Oh, yes. It didn't stop in the very early days. It did happen many times in the war. At least in 1890, yes, it did happen, sure.
Well, thank you all for coming this evening. There are still some cookies and drinks, so you can help yourself. And thank you again.
One other thing I just thought about. I wanted to mention something about, I had a copy of the Calvert County Census records from 1800, and then there was some in there in between 1800 and 1850 that disappeared, got burned. But from 1850 to 1880, I have those records in my home. So if you're ever looking for somebody in those years, call me. This particular issue for the black family, I have references to black families, and there was something in the paper some time ago about a census which was the only one that ever listed slaves. There was one for Calvert County in 1860 which listed slaves, and I have it. So if you ever know people who are looking for something, just have to call me.
Still going?
No, I'm trying to make it fade.
Of the trades of it now, and then it's hard to talk about everything. What a lot of people don't realize is the beaches were the place to go up through the 50s. What killed us was the Bay Bridge. Everyone came here from Baltimore and Washington. When the Bay Bridge was built and they had other opportunities to go to the eastern shore, that with the combination of slot machines being illegal, that area just suffered tremendously and took more than 15 years to recuperate from loss of revenue. There used to be more than 18 boarding houses and hotels in North Beach alone. Grand hotels in Chesapeake Beach, Belvedere's with the Great Derby in 1919, going way out over the water where the Rod and Reel restaurant is. people would come to ride that roller coaster because it was wooden, and they were going up and down over the water on this fabulous wooden roller coaster. And I forgot to mention something else of interest. We had the only 2 saltwater pools. One of them was at Chesapeake Beach at the amusement park. The pool